Hello, everybody, and welcome back to OMB Reviews. I am the critic who is a cynic. Hope you're doing well, and today we're doing a box office breakdown for this past weekend, which saw Beetlejuice once again take the #1 spot, having a pretty dominant hold of 54% from its opening weekend. Remember, this film opened to $111 million domestically, which is already so much higher than what anyone could have projected. So to get a $51.6 million second weekend, again, only a drop of 54%, is really, really good, and really the only thing holding this film back from making mass amounts of money, at least during its theatrical release, is the fact that it's really not doing much of anything in the international markets. This is much more of a domestic release, but obviously making more of your money domestically versus internationally is not the worst thing in the world, but it will explain, I think, and hope, later on when we go into the projections for the total box office returns for this movie, why it's not going to be as high as some of the other films that maybe we have seen this past year that might have had similar domestic releases or similar domestic results. Ultimately, it comes down to a numbers game with those international markets usually taking a huge portion of total profits, even though the return on investment in those markets is not all that good. We also had some new releases from Universal. Speak No Evil, doing a little bit better than I think some initial projections would have indicated, around $11.5 million there. And then the film from Daily Wire Plus from SDG releasing Am I Racist? It was vying for that #3 spot, and I thought it had a pretty good chance to do so based on the initial projections, but the film actually came in well below those projections going into the weekend. It was initially being projected on some sites as upwards of $8 million. It actually ended up making around $4.7 million. And I know there's a lot of speculation as to what could have actually been the cause of that happening, but the fact remains is that the theaters that it was actually released in was 1,500. Its per theater ratio was pretty solid, pretty darn good, and better than the film that did get in third place, but still, definitely not as strong as it was hoping to be, but still in that top 5, which is definitely a good place to be, regardless of anyone's personal opinions or views on the film or even on the company behind the film. We'll talk about that and a plethora of other films. Before going any further, though, please make sure you smash that like button, loud that fire button over an Aussie, smash the rumble button as well. Also, make sure that you are subscribed to the channel, hit that bell, that way you get notified every time your video or live stream goes live on the channel. So, of course, Beetlejuice doing incredibly well here. If you look at the worldwide numbers, $224 million is currently where the film stands, but look at how massive of a difference, of a discrepancy there is between the domestic and international releases. And it's not necessarily that this film has not gotten any international releases in different countries. As you can see, most countries at this point in the international charting has had a release for this movie, with the exception being Japan, which is going to be released on the 27th of September. I doubt the film will make much of a splash there. If you really just go to any of the markets, you'll notice, right, we're talking about single digits for almost every single one of these markets. Now, these have not been updated as of this past weekend, meaning the individual charting has not been updated. The total number usually is accurate, so it has to be noted there. Some people say, why is it that the chart is indicating this, but the total seems to be a little bit different? That's why. Usually when these numbers come out, there's just a general total number that is released by these tracking agencies, and then over time, you can dive into those numbers further, get the individual countries' releases, get some final analysis and final data on those movies, and if you've ever wondered why those numbers are the way they are, that is the reason why. But again, as we're recording this video, at least according to thenumbers.com, right now, $224 million is where this film currently stands, with only $36 million international, $188 million domestic. So this film is definitely on pace to be able to get $250+ million at the domestic box office by the end of its run, and with a very mild, very low, in fact, we could say, international release, probably looking at north of $300 million, $300 to $400 million worldwide, my guess at this point, by the end of its actual release. So very good job for Beetlejuice for Warner Brothers, and clearly they have a winner on their hands as far as the box office is concerned, still dominating that per theater ratio and just dominating the box office in general. Really won't be until maybe next weekend that there is any potential for this to change, but I think Beetlejuice will be in the top 3 at least for at least the next few weeks, if I had to guess. Speak No Evil from Universal. This was a film I thought had some potential to overperform, to do a little bit better than some initial projections were indicating, and it looks like it is, again, doing pretty well, at least right now. Speak No Evil making around $11.5 million as of the recording of this video, according to what we have in front of us. And because I do like to, whenever I can, ensure that the data is accurate and that the information I'm giving is accurate, we can go ahead and look up Box Office Theory real quick, because again, I do want to make sure that the numbers that I am remembering from before the weekend are indeed accurate. So let's go ahead and pull up the weekend forecasting over on Box Office Theory, and they had going into the weekend 12.4. So actually, I stand corrected. So actually, all the films except for Beetlejuice doing worse than initially projected. This is the reason why I do this thing live, and I, again, like to try to correct myself whenever I can. So Speak No Evil actually came in underneath the projections, right, of $11.5 million versus the 12.4 being projected by Box Office Theory. Now, it is important, of course, to note that this does still fall within the range of where this film was thought, right? The traditional tracking for this movie was around $10 million plus, so it actually came in above the traditional tracking and came in between the Box Office Theory's numbers of $10 to $15 million in its initial projections. So definitely, I think, not as bad as it could be, but obviously not as strong either. Thought this film actually would have done a little bit better because it's just seemed like a very good film. It seemed like a film that was going to be able to really bring a lot of people out, especially with a very creepy performance. Even if you've just seen the trailers from James McAvoy, it's gotten some mixed reactions from some people who have seen the film. It seems in general, though, if you look to most movie websites, people are enjoying it. I tend to prefer the audience over on Critic List. They tend to be a much better group over there to be able to give kind of accurate thoughts and not have to worry about bias systems or anything like that. 12 people have seen on that site right now, and right now it's actually rocking a solid rad score, almost getting into even the most excellent category. I'm planning on seeing this film if I can sometime tonight, so I'll give you my thoughts, put this review over on Critic List, and then I might be able to get a review out during our live stream on Monday, tomorrow night. But as you can see, right, for the most part, other than just maybe one person who said it was decent, all right, 2 decents and a bogus. Okay, 3 decents and a bogus. It looks like most people are in that most excellent to rad territory. So yeah, probably going to be a film that's going to be like, hey, do you really care about James McAvoy mostly, or do you care about the actual plot of the film? I think really depending on which one of those is the reason why you're watching the movie is going to really determine how you feel about it. But hey, regardless of that, it's doing well enough at this point. The question really is it going to be able to pick up some legs down the line or not? Because even at a lower budget, it still has a little ways to go. Deadpool Wolverine continuing to hang out in the top 3 spot even after 8 weeks of release, still making another $5.2 million. As you can see, this film definitely on track to get between 630 and 650. I would say probably closer to 635, 640 million at kind of like a high-end range there by the end of its domestic run. This film is very much nearing the end of its domestic run. And so very good, solid numbers here coming from the Walt Disney Company. And another film, which again, on paper, it seems right as a documentary film, as a film from a very, limited releasing company, distribution company, right? Daily Wire Plus, never having its own theatrical release before. 4.75 million is not the worst thing in the world. Now, here is the one thing, though, I will say. I think a lot of people are going to make excuses for this movie or going to really try to spin this, right? So they'll say things like, oh, man, this got into the top 5 movies of this weekend. But if you follow the box office like I do, that doesn't really mean a whole lot, right? If you are top 5 in a market where people and films in general, even films that are having decent holds, are not making copious amounts of money, are not making really enough money to make necessarily even their budgets back, as in the case of Reagan, for instance, which again, those holds percentage-wise, it's in the top 5, but because it costs a certain amount of money, it's really not set at this point to make its money back theatrically. That's where this film currently is at as well, right? Some initial projections on the budget have it around $3 million. Honestly, I do not have that number in front of me. But when you add in the production cost of the film, the fact they had to pay a lot of these DEI experts that are in the movie thousands and thousands of dollars, something tells me that, yeah, you're probably looking at the film, ballooning to being especially for an independent film, for a documentary independent film, being a little bit more on the more expensive side. And again, I'm not an expert on when it comes to documentary films by any means, but I do think it is a win in that they did get into the top 5. They did make $4.7 million. They did do that at 1,500 screens, which means their per theater ratio is even on par with a major release from Universal in the case of Speak No Evil. And is also even more than the 8 weeks later of Deadpool Wolverine, is also better than a lot of the other films even on this list that made less money this weekend. So it's a win in that way. But I think that anyone trying to spin this as being more than just hey, it was a solid opening, nothing to write home about, but still good nonetheless, is I think going to be trying to oversell it a bit too much. The other thing that is oftentimes being talked about is there's a lot of rumor, speculation, and reporting that the film has been kicked out of various screens or there's been some craziness going on there. Well, even if that were true, guess what? That means that those theaters would not show up into the theater counts. So this is talking about the reporting coming from the theaters, the 1,517 screens that have been reporting numbers. That is what this is talking about here, okay? And remember, going to the weekend, it was roughly around 1,500 screens that was initially being projected projected. So we're not seeing a massive loss in screens that would have made that much of a difference as far as total revenue is concerned. I think ultimately it comes down to the fact that, yes, there is definitely an audience of people who are going to see this movie and support it. I think some screens you're probably going to might be a little bit more on the pack side. It really depends on the market that you're at. Depends on the showtime as well. I went to go see this film around a 7:30 or so showtime, and there was about 20 people in there. This was for the opening night, the Thursday opening premiere of the film. So definitely, I would say a decent showing for a movie like this, but also nowhere near the levels of some other films that you would typically see. So again, it's a win in many, many ways. I just am concerned that they might be attempts to try to twist or explain away why it's not as high. Again, remember, even Box Office Theory, who, again, is really trying to stay as apolitical about this as they possibly can, was projecting it to do $8.2 million. This is far below that $8.2 million. And again, people can try to make excuses for it, but the numbers are what they are. Projections were 8.2, numbers actually 4.7, and there's no evidence of there being any actual restraint from this movie, meaning there's no actual evidence of, hundreds and hundreds of theaters being impacted where people weren't able to go see the movie. You might have an example here or there, but as far as the bottom line is concerned, that doesn't make a $4 million difference. I'm just saying that right now, and unless further evidence, clear evidence comes out, that's where I will stay. Coming from the number 5 spot is indeed Reagan with a 39% drop there. Killer's Game, a new film from Lionsgate. Lionsgate, man, I tell you, they are in very, very deep trouble because there's not been really a single release from that company in the last year or so that has been really able to do much of anything box office wise. They've gotten a lot of flops on their hands, and it looks like that's going to continue with a movie I had no interest in. Dave Bautista's in it, and Bautista to me is just kind of that epitome of everything you don't want in a Hollywood film. He really can't act all that much, and then outside of that, right outside of his acting career, he's kind of a despicable person also in a lot of ways, so can't really say I'm that surprised or sad to see a film like this failing. But yeah, only $991 per screen, a wide release at 2,600 screens. So yeah, looks like Lionsgate has another bomb on their hands. Number 7 spot with the Alien Romulus still holding around. It Ends With Us still also holding around, dropping down to the number 8 spot. This film's theatrical release essentially is done. The 4 to the number 9 spot, and a new film, Fathom Events, God's Not Dead, In God We Trust, only making $1.4 million there. So again, definitely on the low side for a film like that, I would say. I have seen the God's Not Dead films do a bit better than that. I've seen Fathom Events do a lot better than that. So hey, maybe it's time for us to maybe stop making those movies. I feel like now there's like 7 or 8 of them, it seems. And even the first one I thought was just that very cheesy style of filmmaking that really didn't work unless you were in that space. And I don't think they've gotten any better since then. Clearly there are people that will go to see it, but not nearly as much as they might actually need. Going into those individual releases, as I mentioned before, $224 million for Beetlejuice. Beetlejuice doing very well. Speaking No Evil, $11.5 million. No internationals being reported as of yet. I will go ahead and update this just to see if we are going to be expecting any numbers here. So we are waiting, I think, for some reporting on this. So Argentina, Australia have a release this weekend. Brazil, Chile. Oddly enough, it gets a release in China yesterday, so we are going to definitely be getting some international numbers as of this video and as of thenumbers.com. No international numbers to be had, so if you're posting and saying the internationals are actually this, as of right now, there are not. So again, take it with what it is. Deadpool Wolverine, $1.29 billion, so easily going to get to 1.3 plus billion. And my race is at 4.75 billion. I think this only has a domestic release. So again, is this good? I would say, again, it's a bit of that mixed bag, but ultimately, it's a great film as far as just a entertaining movie that does a lot of very good exposure of some of the nonsense going on in the DEI world, but at the same time, it is definitely a film that's going to appeal mostly to a certain demographic. Reagan at $23.3 million, doing better than what was anticipated, doing better down the line. But because that first starting off number there has never really gotten to such a high, really have gotten that high, and everything since then hasn't really gone on that high either, Reagan is not likely to make its money back still. Killer's Game, again, predicted to be a flop. Let's go to the charts because we love charts here on OMB Reviews. So, as I mentioned with Beetlejuice, based off of the fact we now have 224 million being reported as of right now, and I'll update this as the numbers come in, if any numbers come in and change those internationals. I'm projecting the film to make somewhere between $320 and $448 million. So, a very, very solid start, meaning this film is making profit. This film is going to make profit and is going to be doing pretty well. Right now, projecting around $42 to $118 million. That's using an older 2.5 times the budget metric, meaning a more accurate 3 times the budget for a film like this would probably be closer to maybe 30 to maybe 75 million in net profit. The one key factor, though, that must be taken into account is usually that 3 times the budget number is because of how numbers split domestic versus international. Because this film is really doing nothing internationally, it may be a little bit closer to that 2.5. And so I think the chances of it getting 50 plus million in net profit is definitely on the table. And hey, that is definitely going to be a good thing for this movie, especially in an era where films like this just aren't making a whole lot of money. As I mentioned with Am I Racist, the initial projections were it cost around $3 million. Still waiting on full confirmation of that. But at $1.9 million, it means it's around negative $3 million in the red. Either way, though, as I mentioned, there's a low number there. And again, this number's actually not been updated, right? Because it's obviously closer to 4 million. Let me see if I can actually update my charts in real time. That way we can see if these numbers have changed, obviously, because it did make $4 million in its domestic debut. But just looking at the numbers that we have in front of us, right, we have to, of course, make certain assessments and certain calculations. So the films, as they load up here, 1992 still projected to be a flop. Beetlejuice, 32 million in the red as of right now. So it's definitely on its way to make its money back and to make some profit. Am I Racist, based off of typical standards, is actually around minus 1.8 million. With a start like this, though, and with a lot of word of mouth and a lot of positive word of mouth, I do think this film is going to actually theatrically be able to break into the profitability territory. And for a movie that was probably initially being made to not be strictly theatrical, at least in an initial release, I think this is going to be a win for them. Definitely gives them a little bit more exposure, might be able to get more people to subscribe to the platform as well. Yeah, I would say this is definitely a win for them, just not as big of a win, I think, as many of us had suspected it might be, and as at least initial projections for the film were going into it. Speak No Evil at 16.1 million in the red as of right now. Once those internationals come in, I imagine they'll be cut down quite a bit. This film also, I can project right now, is going to be making some money. The question really is just how much money will it be making? This movie costing around $15 million to make, so very low budget film there, but obviously still needs to make a little bit more to make money. And then The Killer's Game at $30 million from Lionsgate, yeah, at 2.6 million, single digits there. You're not going to likely see this number get that much lower. So yeah, I think this film probably guaranteed to be a flop, at least at this point in release. There's nothing that really indicates that this will not actually be the case whatsoever. But hey, these are the thoughts that I have on these movies. Have you seen any of these new releases, whether it's The Killer's Game, Speak No Evil, Am I Racist, or other older films like Beetlejuice, or the case of Reagan, right? I mentioned with Reagan before. Right now, that film is around $24 million in the red based off of the numbers that we have. So again, you do have to kind of understand that this film is not likely to make its money back theatrically, even if it's had good percentage holds down the line, because it's all still dropping from that very, very low opening weekend. It's just not recovering from that. It costs just enough to not be able to do that. And do you think that we're going to see some further box office data and further box office support for films like Am I Racist, or Speak No Evil, or The Killer's Game? I think probably more likely that we'll see some good news for Speak No Evil and Am I Racist versus Killer's Game, but those are just my thoughts. What are yours? Let me know in the comment section down below. If you like this video, smash that like button, that fire button over on Odyssey, smash the button as well. You guys are all amazing, and beautiful people, have a wonderful rest of your day, a blessed Sunday, and as always, God bless. Now for a huge special shout out to all of my Chosen of Valhalla members, starting off first with my people on Patreon, Father Luca Illick and Miss Martin Muses. Check out her YouTube channel by the same name, Miss Martin Muses. Also to my Subscribestar people, Matt317. Check out his Twitch channel by the same name, Matt317. And also to the K-Man. Check out his website, xtheboundaries.co. And lastly to my YouTube member, Mr. Roy shout out to you, good sir. And if you want your name shouted out at the end of every live stream and video, check out the top link in the video description below where you get access to that. Also, you get access to a plethora of other things. You get your name listed at the end of every live stream and video, like you saw in those names that came up before this video started, and also access to a giveaways channel that I host over on the Discord server where I give away 4Ks, Steelbooks, Blu-rays, all kinds of stuff. So check that out if you're interested in that. Also, I have an exclusive podcast that I hold at least once a month, and it's always a good time, and you get extra bonus content with that also. So if any of that sounds interesting, again, check out that top link in the video description below. You guys are all amazing, and beautiful people. Have a wonderful rest of your day, a blessed August, and as always, God bless.